Hey everybody, it's Kyle here, and welcome back. Well, actually, welcome back to Level Design Breakdown, but I'd also like to welcome myself back to my channel because I've been gone for about maybe 6, 7 months, something like that. I've been off working on projects, back to study for me because I am also now a fully qualified teacher. So excuse me. What I'd like to do today is actually go through creating a tile sheet, as well as some fundamentals about creating tile sheets. But yeah, what we're gonna look at today is tile sheets for RPG games, but it doesn't just apply to that. You can also take the fundamentals from this and have a look at adapting it to create maybe a 2D platformer tile sheet or something like that. Anyway, yeah, so I'd like to welcome myself back. I'd like to welcome you guys back to Level Design Breakdown. Now, at the end of the video, I have one particular announcement to make. This part of the video is actually, I actually went on for a bit too long in the original take. So this is kind of replacing that original part. So if it skips a little, don't worry. You'll be able to pick up where I sort of skip things. So just don't worry about it, because really at the end of the day, you're not missing out on any important information. This is just, consider this to be like a take 2 of scene 1. So today, obviously, we're talking about tile sheets. So what do I mean by tile sheet? I'll show you a quick example. This is what a tile sheet looks like. Now, this is from RPG Maker VXAce. I have my own license for that. I did buy a license, but I haven't actually used it to make a game. It's not because I don't trust it, it's because it's just a little bit out of my range. I don't want to have to go, I already understand language of Unreal, Unity, Unity C#, Unreal C++, Game Maker GML, and really I don't want to have to learn the process of using yet another engine. So I thought I'd give it a shot though. Turns out I don't really have the time. I don't have as much time as I have, or as much time now that I used to have. That makes a little bit more sense. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at today is creating our own tile sheet. And this is what a complete tile sheet would look like. So the first thing I want to talk about is effective. I speak faster than I write. Effective tile sheets. Construction. Can I fit the whole word? Construction. Construction. Yay. All right, so that's the first point. The second point that I want to make is something that's not specific to pixel art, and that is like effective tile sheet construction. Yeah, but there's also like light and contrast. Now, specifically contrast. I can spell. I promise you I can. Contrast. Now, this relates specifically to things like how well you can see the environment and how it will affect how the player can see their character and NPCs and monsters and chests, like pick up items and things like that. So I'll go into that a little bit later. And then finally, lastly, we have like just general appearance. So appearance, which sort of ties into light and contrast. Appearance. And this actually relates more to both light and contrast, but also it's affected by your visual style. So I don't know, this, like I said, was from RPG Maker. Obviously you've got all different styles of pixel art. So you've got the old school, and I want to put emphasis on the word old school pixel art, where you can sort of see a very clear transition between light and shadow, light, midtone, and shadow. So it really does depend, but generally the processes are the same when it comes to creating these tile sheets. So that, and then finally, obviously, we're going to have a section where I make my own version. Make, own. Yeesh. I'm an English teacher. I should be able to write neatly, but I can't. Make own tile sheet. Yeah. So that's all we're going to be doing today. And then towards the end of the video, we'll also have announcements, because I have one particular announcement that I want to make. Maybe I'll sneak in another one, but yeah, for now, let's start with effective tile sheet construction. What is it? Let's grab, because we're going to be making something like this today, and I've actually already finished it, because like I said, this is like take 2. Normally I only do 1 take, but it's been 6 months since my last video, 6 months or more since my last video. I'm a little bit rusty. And if you look over here, you can see the final product. But we're not going to focus on that. So we're going to select this, we're going to copy it, we're going to go Control C. Now we're going to come over here. This grid looks a little bit mysterious, a little bit weird, strange, whatever you want to call it. Create a new layer for it. I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to show you exactly how effective tiling works. Just like that. Okay, so what we've got here, we've got 16 by 16 pixel squares, if that makes any sense. Basically what it is we've got that. So we've got 16 of these. 12 of them are border pieces, and 4 of them are actual tiling areas. So this 32 by 32 square is actually made up of 4 16 by 16s. What you want to take into account is the fact that the way this is designed, if I'm not mistaken, is that they're made to be either, you can't sort of mix and match these 4 tiles. You can't have this tile over here and you can't have this tile over here. They're designed to tile in this specific manner. The problem with that is that it creates an obvious tiling effect, especially this area here. You will be able to see that tile very easily, because the thing is, like, shadows will always tile a lot better, but that's more about, you know, light and contrast, not really about effective tile construction. So effective tile construction is all about, you know, this is effective tile construction. You've got modular pieces or semi-modular pieces that you can use to create, you know, vast open spaces or narrow corridors, footpaths, or whatever. That's what it is. So if you can fit all this detail into 64, this is all 64 by 64. If you can fit all that detail into this small area, you're good. That's really all it is. That's what it is there. Now, that's effective tile construction, is being able to identify what pixels need to go where, what sort of parts make up your tile sheet, and how you can best use these blocks to create, you know, interesting areas. With some things here, you'll notice that we've got 2 extra blocks here. They're just like miniaturized versions of this big area. But if you look closely, you can see that, you know, it just uses this particular middle square and just puts a border around it. And this is that middle square without the border. So that's tile sheet construction. So the fundamentals of creating a good tile sheet are making sure that you've covered for almost all situations that you will need a particular tile for. Now you'll notice here that if I zoom out or go into another area, you'll notice here that we have like transitional areas. That's also part of, oh wait, this up here is probably a more precise example. Here we have a transition from sand to stone, or here from what looks like dry grass to stone. But anyway, this is also another thing about effective tile construction is transitions. These outer blocks here serve as transitional blocks, right? And everything in the middle is what's obviously going to be in the middle of all these blocks, because the thing is, you don't want to have grass to all of a sudden stone, right? You need to have some sort of buffer that sort of eases the player into that. Otherwise it looks bad. I'm not going to dress it up with pretty words. It'll just look bad. So that's that. Light and contrast, pretty obvious. I shouldn't have to spend more than 30 seconds on this. Light and contrast. Can the player still see their character and a whole bunch of other characters when propped up against the background? Unfortunately, I can't provide you any examples today because we are just focusing on creating um, the middle 4 tiles. But you need to take this into account when you're creating your own version. Is that you should be able to tell, the player should still be able to see them, but the background should only just give context, nothing more. And that's that's about it. That's about it for light contrast. We'll actually put all this into practice. Now, appearance and visual style. Is it cartoony? Is it anime-ish? Is it painterly? That's really all it is. And the only thing you have to do, the only thing you have to think about is how does it affect? How does it sort of tie into your game? Does it match what the players look like? Because often you'll have the player created first before you actually create the tile sheet. And you want, obviously, to put those two together to unify them. That's why it's called a background, because it sets them into context. It unifies all of the different elements, sets the mood, everything like that. So we're really not going to get far just talking about it. So I'm going to fade to black. When we come back, I'll be sort of going full crazy, actually creating my own version of this tile sheet. So again, this was a take 2. So hopefully all the information that I actually wanted to go through with the original take is here. If not, leave a comment in the section below and I will answer them in the comment section, and I will get to them as soon as possible. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so well, I initially I wanted to actually just use this bit here, this actual canvas. I didn't want to actually have to create a new one, but nothing usually goes according to plan, especially if you're teaching. But nonetheless, you get the rough idea of how I like to work. Now, I should note that, and I do repeat myself because this is just narration, obviously, but I would like to note that this is, yes, the first time that I've approached it with a painterly method. So at the start, I didn't actually know what I was doing. But I do know that with the painterly style, you kind of go with using a brush rather than using the old school, pixel per pixel, in other words, using the Photoshop pencil tool to add in your pixels. And I actually did want to try it out. So, I mean, I was thinking, if it fails, it fails. There's nothing we can really do about it. So here I've isolated this selection to a single 32 by 32 block because that's what we're doing. That second window there, that small window there, is designed, I've put it up there so that I can always see what it looks like at 100%. In other words, what exactly does the player see? How will they see the block? Now, obviously, I wanted to make sure that I could use the tiles as 16 by 16 pieces. So I actually put a little bit more work into creating a more effective tiling system. Now here, obviously, I'm just sort of fixing everything, and you can see here that I'm just laying down seemingly random pixels all over the place. And that's because, yeah, I sort of kind of gave up on the painterly look, but you do notice that I will eventually come back to it. So I'm just really just messing around. And then I remember, well, we're going with a painterly look. And so you'll see it in a sec where I actually start sort of putting in blobs of highlights as opposed to sort of going, one area at a time, which is actually how I normally do things, even though I did say that I go with a full proper, not proper pixel art, but like old school pixel art approach, or at least that's what I used to do anyway. This is how I actually do things. I actually start with blobs, and when I actually finally made the bridge between painterly and the old school pixel technique, the conclusion that I came to is that it's the overall look that's different, not the actual process. So the process turns out to not be any different. Now, just as a reminder, this video is, I think, if I remember correctly, 200 times speed. So, sorry, not 200 times. It's 2 times the speed, so I'm working twice as fast-ish. But yeah, so here we're just, filling in the very basic details. You know, where do I want the shadows to be? Where do I want the main highlights to be? We're not adding in any special contrasts or any minute details yet. Now the brush that I'm using here is actually a regular round brush, and I do explain that a little bit later. Again, this is obviously just narration. So if information is repeating, please just ignore it. But yeah, I'm just creating forms here. I'm not really doing anything special, just creating forms. Okay, so here's where we are at right now. We now have sort of the foundations of the tile that I'm going to use, the tile sheet that I'm making. And what I'm doing right now is essentially just making sure that I have all the forms right before I actually get into creating more detail for it. The issue that most beginner pixel artists, and even, you know, some people who are more experienced with pixel art, is that when it comes to this is actually the first time, by the way, that I'm going for the hand painted feel, so it might fail. But yeah, the traditional sort of pixel art style just would take way too long, much longer than is necessary. But here's the thing, when you're working with pixel art, you're always going to be working zoomed in. And if you notice during the video, I kind of shifted it quite a few times. And the reason why I did that is so that I could check the tiling. More importantly, you also need to be able to see it at 100% at all times. The reason for that is because you want to know, hey, I want it to look this way. I want this level of detail, and you can spot where potential tiling errors are going to occur. So if we're looking here, we can see that this dark patch over here might cause some obvious tiling errors. Not errors, but people will be able to pick it up a lot easier than if we were to just sort of just go with it. Go with another method or another tile. Now, what I'm using here is an actual brush. That's a soft edge brush at only 1 pixel. I forgot to mention that, and I should have. But if you notice, I actually started with the pencil tool, and you can do that. You can do that for like touch-up work and things like that. But at this stage, it's a bit too much to be able to actually use this method. More so if you're working on a hand-painted look. So I'm going to keep going in this direction, and I'll speed it up again when we come back. When I slow it down, I'll be able to explain. So I'm going to add in highlights, a little bit more contrast, because we still need that look to it. So I'll speed it up here, and then we'll go on. Okay, so to work on the contrast of it, to actually figure out exactly how my contrast is going to work, I add in a fresh layer, and that layer has the settings saturation, and it's just a plain full black layer. And what it does is it cancels out all the colors so that you can see everything essentially through dog eyes. Everything's all grayscale. So what that allows you to do is actually pick out contrast and actually, you know, figure out where am I going to put light, where am I going to put shadow. And this is something that a lot of beginner artists do. It's a common mistake amongst beginners, is that, you know, they think the colors match up, but a more experienced artist will tell you that, and I say more experienced, not better, I say more experienced, because it just sounds nicer. But a more experienced artist will be able to tell if there's not enough contrast, or in the case of creating tile sheets, there's too much. Because remember, when you're creating your tile sheets, you want to be able to see characters and all the different elements like monsters and loot crates and things like that. Things that make up the game, the interactable objects that make up the game, rather than the environment itself. I have not seen one of those adventure games in a top-down perspective, so I don't really have that much of an opinion on it. But yeah, here we're just working on creating, we're just creating a highlights. We're creating the highlights, not creating a highlights. We're creating highlights for it. And what I'm doing here is I'm checking to see if what I've done so far has produced any tiling patterns. And Yeah, yeah, I have a lot of windows open. So normally I would have closed all those under other windows, but yeah, the video actually took me, yeah, just like in the introduction, it took me quite a few takes. So this is like a composite of like 3 separate videos. So I had to do a separate take for the opening, another take for the closing, and then you got this original bit which I've actually sped up to 2 times speed. Again, a little bit of repetition of information there. But yeah, what I'm doing now is I'm actually trying to eliminate that tiling. And now this is where you want to catch tiling. You want to get rid of obvious tiling patterns as soon as possible. Now, how you do that is, again, just by creating a much larger canvas and then duplicating your pattern across, your tile sheet across, and then duplicating across the entire span of that larger canvas. So here you can see I check it multiple times. I check it again and again and again. And there's one particular tiling issue, and I'm trying to mark it as best I can. And when I do identify it, even then I have a little bit of trouble. So trying to fix everything, trying to add in like subtle highlights. There you go. I've finally identified where it is, and there I go. I'm now fixing it. So when you're going with a painterly look, what I found is that it's a lot easier in terms of blocking in colors and sort of adding in the little details, but what I found was that it can actually take a fair bit of time. So yeah, this is the product of that. Again, this video is sped up quite a bit, and here this is actually important. Now I'm starting to go into adding in like the fine-tuning details, because we know that especially with things like gravel or rock surfaces, you're going to have some areas that are sort of indented. You're going to have some areas that are sort of pushed up closer towards the viewer. But then because this is for a top-down game, you got to keep in mind that you don't want it to stick out too much. You don't want it to stand out too much. You still want to be able to see the player. So even though I've been even though I've been doing pixel art for a while, you got to also think about the fact that I haven't actually done pixel art in about, I think, maybe 2-3 years, something like that. Because yeah, I went to study, I did transition into doing 3D, and so if you don't practice, if you don't maintain a skill, you do end up forgetting. It's kind of like a muscle, really. If you don't train the muscle, it'll lose any shape or form. So yeah, so what I'm doing here is, yeah, it's just constant checking. You gotta constantly check, because if you finish your tile sheet, you hand it over to whoever's in charge, whether it be somebody else or you actually put it into a game and export it, and then you find that you do have obvious tiling effects, then I won't say that it will look bad, but it'll be obvious. And to especially some of the more picky gamers out there, they will dwell on that one fact. And obviously you don't want that. So what I'm doing here is I've actually gone and grabbed the Photoshop pencil tool, which is just the pencil tool, and then I'm adding in sharp highlights to selected areas. So I'm being selective about where I put all these extra highlights, but I'm also adding in more midtones so that we can sort of establish the fact that, yeah, it is uneven ground. We've got some bits that are sticking out, some bits that are sort of pushed in closer towards the earth, further away from the player's eyes. And if you look in the top corner, you can see that, yeah, that it's starting to take shape. It's looking like it could go into some sort of painterly game. But again, this is the first time that I've used this technique, and I will repeat that constantly until I get tired of hearing my own voice. But yeah, this is it. I'm just doing touch-ups now, making sure that the tile itself makes sense, or this section of the tile sheet makes sense. Now, unlike the example video, I've actually done my best to design it in a way that you can use the 16 by 16 blocks and mix and match them. Of course, the only problem with that is that when it comes to a border, it does have to conform to the original tiling sort of pattern. That's the word I'm looking for, pattern. Okay, so I'm pretty much finished here. It's probably going to be silence for about a few seconds. So I'll just make a few comments. So it's just shading here. Shading and extra highlights and just sort of pushing things back, pulling things forward. Nothing too overly significant. But yeah, this is pretty much finished. What you see here, that's pretty much it. Okay, so now we've actually finished with our tutorial. Again, this is a take 2. I am so rusty, it is not funny. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab this. I'm thankful that I did not end up closing this down because I didn't actually save it. I did only make it specifically to be for this tutorial and this tutorial only. But this is the what the final touch-up sort of kind of looks like. I'm just gonna get rid of that. Now, looking at it, I'd probably make a few changes. Excuse me. I'd want to make a few changes. The first change being more contrast. And I can prove this by saying, okay, hang on, what size is this? 32 by 32. We'll create a new canvas that's 64 by 64, already done. We'll take this, select layer 3, Control A, copy, paste it down. Now, yeah, I should have actually closed all those other windows earlier, but doesn't matter. We're already here. We're already finished. Well, we're almost finished. And what I'm doing here is I'm checking for contrast. I'm checking for tiling issues, obvious tiling issues. So, minor ones you can probably get away with, but for the most part, you want to avoid as much of the repetition as possible. So here is the 64 by 64 pixel. Now, if you remember, we have this where we analyzed it. Strictly speaking, we were only creating this middle area here, but still, we need to be able to check to see if it tiles. Say we were going to create an open gravel area or whatever material this is supposed to be. I actually didn't think about what it was going to be, which is actually a bad thing. But what is if we're going to make a huge area and just fill it with this tile, what would it look like? And that's really why you want to test it out. So we want to go view actual pixels, which will make it 100% zoom. So this is exactly how you will see it in the game. So a few changes. Looking at this right now, here are the changes that I would make. First of all, we have a few contrast issues. So I'm going to direct you over to this navigator area here. We have some contrast sort of we have low contrast in sort of the middle-ish area here and in some small patches. Down here as well, we have some contrasting issues, and that reflects over here. If you look close enough, and you might not be able to see it, but you've got some areas that are a little bit darker than others. So it does obviously depend on what you're going for, what look you're going for. But at the end of the day, it is up to you, but you should be thinking about exactly what it's for, unlike what I did, which I did not think about what it was for. Now, there's another thing. If I zoom in to about here, we can see that this area of detail here, this little block here, actually gets lost. Let's see. Let's keep an eye. Let's keep this area highlighted, and then we'll go View, Actual Pixels, and we can see that that area of detail there was actually lost. That's because there wasn't enough contrast to actually support a break in the pixels there. So some improvements that I would make to this particular tile sheet is more contrast, more lights, more shadows in areas where it needs it, because already here, just here we can see that that break is almost non-existent, and that's one thing that I would like to fix. Obviously, I'm not going to do that here. But yeah, let's have a quick recap. We've now created our own tile sheet. Obviously, if you have questions, leave them in the comment section below. But now we can finally tick off this last point. Make your own tile sheet, or make my own tile sheet. Hopefully you can follow the video. I know it's sped up. It's sped up to about 200%, so that's 2 times faster. So if you do have questions, I'll be happy to answer them. That's what I do as a teacher. So that's it. Obviously, because it's a 64 by 64 tile, we're obviously going to want to add in border pieces, transitional blocks. Remember, if we go back to here, we need those transitional blocks, but we were only testing out the middle area. Now, that announcement that I was talking about, I have about 15 seconds to announce it, so let's try to get it done. I'll be starting my Patreon campaign very soon because my friend suggested that I do that. Now, I would like to ask for your support, and I will put a link up as soon as I finish setting up the page. I haven't actually set it up yet to be a content creators page, but I will be very soon, so please keep an eye out on it. Keep an eye out for it, sorry, and if you can, I would like to have your support. Anyway, thank you for watching. Hope to see you next time. Bye.